Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. I am here tonight with Marci Senders, who is the art director at Disney-Hyperion. Hi Marci, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
So can we start off by you giving us a little information on your background and how you got into design?
Yeah, so I went to art school and I went to Tyler School of Art, and it's a great school because you basically don't start with a major, and as you go through the program and the foundation year, you kind of take the classes and then you develop your major based on you know what you do well in your foundation year. You don't get to pick your classes, they kind of pick you, and then you go from there. So you're kind of open up to all different types of things. And I did go to the graphic design route, and I graduated with my bachelor's in graphic design and a minor in art history. And then from there, I got a job at Alloy Entertainment, which is a book packager. And I don't know if you want me to define what a book packager is.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
So a book packager, basically, they sell the book from cover to cover. So they sell the concept to a publisher. They find the editor, they do the cover. So basically, at the end of the day, they hand over the publisher the files cover to cover. So it's basically a freelance book, including the design. So it's really creative. It was really fun. There's so many just super talented people that I worked with. It was just like an in-house kind of idea maker. That's where I worked on The Sister of the Traveling Pants. I worked on so many nonfiction books. It was really cool. It's just this funky place to work. And then from there, I went to Random House, and I was at Random House for 8 years. And I worked on a lot of series, a lot of repackages. I got to repackage the Judy Blume books. I repackaged The Face on the Milk Carton. I did a lot of work on classic books. I remember just going through the stacks with an editor and being like, can we repackage this? Can we repackage that? It was really a fun, that was really fun. And then from there, I went to Disney, where they were looking for someone to oversee all the young adult novels. So I worked, when I went over to Disney-Hyperion, it was basically, I oversaw all the kind of older middle grade up. So I've been at Disney for 10 years this summer. And now the job has changed a little bit. Now I oversee intellectual property. So anything kind of, it's very similar to Alloy, where it's in-house ideas. I oversee anything that is IP. So it's a lot of it's Disney. So it's a lot of what can we do with this princess, or in backstories and just different, taking content and rolling with it. And it's really fun that you're working with these editors and they just had an idea, and then then you get to work on the book. And so that's been really fun and really opened me up to not just working on young adult titles. And I also just really love being an art director and managing staff, and everyone's so talented, and it's so fun to watch other designers grow and help them out and to their career path. And it's so I really enjoy that as well, and not just the designing part. And
so let's talk a little bit about process. When you get a manuscript from an editor, where do you start with it? Are you getting a manuscript at an early stage, or it's not until it's finalized that you get to see it?
Yeah, we usually get it. We need to get, because we work probably like a year before the book's published. So we get like early stages of the manuscript, and we read all the books. That's, you know, sometimes I get to a point where I'm like, this is a really long book, and the editors like, can I just tell you the ending? And then, you know, but you do need, a designer does need to read the book for tone and voice. That's really important. Even if it isn't the full book, you do have to read it. And we give editors a art form that they fill out. It's the summary. It's you know, we ask, like, where does it live in the bookstore? What's its competition? We have a funny question of, you know, if it's going to be a movie, who would you cast? What are you thinking in terms of the cover? And it's just a form. It's all in one place. Sometimes they give inspirational images. It's author feedback. It's, you know, it's whatever information they give us. We just have them put it together, and then we take that and our own thoughts and ideas, and we put it in a mood board, and we put it all in one. It's just a mashup. We try not to plan it out, and then from there we sit down with the editors, and then we start talking about concepts, like, what if we do, you know, an object, or what if we show people, or, you know, we don't want to, maybe we shouldn't show their faces, but it's a couple, so maybe their hand should be holding. And we just kind of look at all the images and all the ideas we had, and it becomes like this mashup. And we usually narrow it down to 3 concepts, and it's like all type, and then there'll be you know, maybe it's iconic, maybe it's a crop of a hand. And then from there, we present, the editor and the designers present the ideas at a fiction meeting, which is to all the editors and all in the entire art department. So it's all levels, and it's a really good way for everyone to put their input in, for editors to see what other editors are working on, because we do have books that overlap. We had one season where we had 3 books about kids going off into the forest. One was a family drama, one was a mystery, one was a romance. So it's good to show, like, all right, so if this is the romance, we got to push that element. And if this is the scary mystery, we have to push that element, because we can't have 3 books with a forest of trees on it. So it is good to show that as a group. And then from there, the designer and the editor just work together. They take all the feedback. The designer goes back and works on it, works with the editor until they get to a place that's where everyone's happy. They show myself, they show the creative director, and then we show the larger group with sales, publicity, marketing, and then they give their input. As far as the author goes, it's different every single time. Sometimes the author has ideas and they get put into the mood boards or put into the art forms. Sometimes if they don't have ideas, it's just presented, we want to present them something that's a little more final. I usually just say it's up to the editors, and it's author care, and it's what they think is going to be more comfortable for that relationship. Because you want them to be involved, and at the end of the day, no matter what and what the agreement is, the author should be happy. It's their book, it's their baby. they have to go out and present it. So we definitely want them happy with the cover. But as far as where they put the input is, it's different every time, and it's different based on relationship and experience. And if they have ideas, we definitely want them, and we'll put them into consideration, but we'll also take that and put it into consideration with everything else, with where's it going to live in the bookstore, and what else is being published in that genre. Like we definitely we take everything into consideration, and we definitely do our research. So it's based on a lot of things.
So if an author saw what you were considering to be a nearly final cover and they said, oh, I hate that, don't do it, would you go back to the drawing board? Would the editor work with them and try and get them comfortable with it? What sort of revision would you be looking at there?
Yeah, so it depends. It depends on what their comments are. And we definitely will, you know, whenever there's a situation, I say, just give me the comments. Just, you know, don't try to make it easy for me. Like, just tell me what it is, because if they're so close to it and they see an issue, like I kind of like, you know, I want to know, because I want to fix it. If it is something that goes against sales, then they'll talk to them. But usually there usually is some change, if not a lot of change. But again, we want them to be happy. I think if there is a situation where we're kind of at odds with sales, I think that's where, you know, if they're saying this is what's going to work and what the author wants might not work, we might change some things, but we're kind of at the mercy of what they think is going to work. But we definitely work very hard to make sure that the authors are happy regardless of the in-house. So yeah, that's a big part of just making everybody happy.
So when it comes to the cover design, what's the difference between a chapter book, a middle grade, a YA? Is one kind illustrated versus photographic? Is it, you know, icons versus people, like you were saying?
I mean, this is kind of how I see it is picture books and chapter books are bought by the parents. So they're usually a little more on the classic side. Middle grade books, the kids pick them out, but the parents pay for them. So you do want the covers to be a little more trendy, a little more brighter colors. And really your market is the kids and not the parents. And young adult, we usually want to do something really like fun and conceptual, and we definitely want crossover, so it should look a little more adult. So and for also young adult, like the kids are buying books and they're paying for it, so it has to appeal to the kids, and the parents are at that point completely out of the purchase process. So we also work aspirationally, like a 12-year-old wants a book that looks like it's for a 14-year-old, and a 14-year-old wants a book that is, you know, 16 and up. So we have to kind of think about that too, and age it, always kind of age it up a little bit.
That makes sense. And when you're looking at covers, do you have certain fonts that you use for covers, or is there a certain size that a title should always be? Anything that somebody who's doing a self-published cover should really keep in mind?
You always want the title to be readable. So it doesn't have to be huge, but if it is on the smaller side, I wouldn't really put it on top of something busy. You really want to make sure a title always pops. I kind of say, like, you know, if you're at a store or seeing a book in, you know, on Amazon in the thumbnail, can you see it from the other side of the room? Like, you definitely want to make sure it's clear. I will get up from my desk and step back and look at it from afar. As far as exact fonts, you know, you really want the art and the font to work together. I think if you do have a busy image, you might want a cleaner font. But if you have a circus book, you definitely want to have a little bit of that flavor. You might not want too much of that flavor because then it just might get too busy. But I really approach fonts, you know, with a fresh eye every single time. If I've got this book, let me look at, we have some font houses. We have different things that, you know, because we publish so many books. We publish, God, like over 100 books a year. They all need to look different. So you do have to kind of start from scratch every single time.
Would you ever have an artist hand draw the title as opposed to using a font?
Yes. Yeah, we do that all the time. And that is one really great way to brand a book, to create a logo, to really help it stick out. We do, especially for, you know, younger books, especially lately, we do stay away from script fonts. So we'll do handwritten, but we don't really do script too much anymore. Sometimes we'll do like a letter with a flourish, but we won't do a full script for younger books anymore because unfortunately they don't learn script in school. So we've had to adapt.
So I've been hearing. And now as far as hiring somebody to do the title, to do the font for it, would that be the same artist who is illustrating the cover, or is that a special class of artist who's capable of doing that?
Sometimes I'll hire someone because they're an illustrator who also does type. Sometimes I'll have to hire 2 people. Or if it's a photo, you know, you get right to a photo, but yeah, it would be a certain person. But yeah, sometimes, yeah, it's different every single time. But there are people that just do fonts, but then there's illustrators that could do both.
And when it comes to the overall package of the book, the trim size, is that something that you're playing a part in deciding? Does all YA fall into basically one size, or it really depends on the book and the editor's decision?
Yeah, so for the younger books, especially picture books, they're all different sizes. I mean, I think there's like some rules, like you don't want them bigger than or taller than a bookcase because then
I think it is. I think they have to be less than 3/4 to fit on a store bookshelf.
Yeah, because then that causes issues. But other than that, there is some flexibility, which is really fun. If you know, have a book about a pig and you want a little more spot, or you know, or a book about a tall building, then you get you know, you can play around with that. But I would say as far as like middle grade and young adult, there is a standard size. And unless it's something special and something gifty, we usually don't break. Once in a while we will, but not a lot. I think we did a poetry book not that long ago, and we did a little bit of a smaller square size.
Okay. So moving on to the interiors, what kind of art goes into each book depending on the age range?
For chapter books, you can, you know, more for early readers, pretty much, you know, depending on the book, you do normally have like at least a spot or a full-size page or full-size picture on every page. So you can get up to like 80 pieces of art. And that goes from, you know, and then middle grade, you might have 1 or 2 images per chapter. And the older you get, the less art you have. Usually with young adult books, you keep the design pretty simple. These days, there always seems to be text messages and different things. So we are bringing art into it more and more and heavily designing it more and more. as we have these extra elements. But you know, we do try to keep the design pretty simple. I mean, it can get pretty busy with all the different elements. But you know, and then we worry about ebooks and how is that going to translate, and how are we going to be able to do that? Because the more art you have, the harder it is to do a reflowable ebook. So that's also, we take that into consideration too.
That makes sense. So if you were converting something that was very art heavy to an ebook, would you have to make it a non-reflowable so that it sits properly?
For the younger books, for the books with a lot of art that almost feel like picture books, yes. But I think, yeah, the less art that there is, like if it's just something like Clementine where it's a spot here and a full page there, they do reflow. They do figure it out.
Okay. And then I know we were talking about font and font size for the cover. What about for interior? Are there standard sizes of fonts? I would assume maybe the younger books need a slightly bigger font for the kids to be able to read them than a YA would.
Yeah, you definitely want to have more space between the lines. You want them to be bigger. I really am partial to making sure fonts have serifs. I think there was a time where people felt like, oh, I can design a book and make it a really clean typeface, and serifs are there so your eye can flow from letter to letter. So if you have a lot of text without serifs, it gets really hard to read. You know, I know that sounds really old school, but they're there for, you know, serifs are there for a reason. But other than that, you just want to always look at and read a page. I mean, when you're designing it, to see if it's hard to read. Just, you know, make sure the lines aren't, you know, too hard. You do want a nice, especially if you're printing the book, you would do want a nice margin. I have a standard template that I always use. I don't really reinvent the wheel too much. You know, you want to stick around, you know, a 12-point type with 16-point leading. You know, that sounds very nerdy, but you know, and you can go a little smaller for the older books. It also has to do with page count sometimes. You know, an editor's like, you know, there aren't that many words, but we really want a 300-page book. So then you do have to be a little more creative and have do more design, like, you know, your chapter heads maybe would go 2 pages and you would figure it out. I've had to do that a couple of times. And the other way too, like we've ran out books and I'm like, this is a great, you know, it looks great. And it is like a 400-page book and it should really only be a 300-page book. So we have to go in and figure out how we can get more lines on the page.
So speaking of page count, when you're looking at series books, you know, a story needs to tell itself to completion. Do you find that you really need books in the same series to sit at closely the same page count, or as long as your trim is the same, you're okay for the page count to vary?
I mean, I guess it's up to the editor. I mean, I guess you don't really want to, you know, especially if the age range is the same, you don't want one book that's 128 pages and the next book that's 400 pages. It's the same kids reading it. But there's a little wiggle room, but I don't think you'd want to go that far away. Usually, like with, for example, the Isle of the Lost series, they vary, but like only like a signature or two, and a signature is 16 pages. So, you know, one book might have 30 more pages than the other book, but they're still around the same range. It's not like a huge gap.
Okay. And what about running heads? At what age range do you start introducing those to a book?
For running heads, for me, that's what you put on a book that you want a quote unquote big book. So for novels, if it's like a big author, and you want it to look really special, that's when you put running heads. I would say running heads, I mean, maybe you wouldn't put them on a book with like an early reader with a lot of art, because you have a lot of design elements anyway, but I start putting them on middle grade books. But it is like one of those quintessential like big book looks.
Okay.
If you want to promote an author.
And I know there's a lot of options for what you can put into the running heads. You can have the author name, you can have the chapter title, you can have the book name. Who's making that decision? Is it you, or is it the editor who's deciding that?
It's usually I'll just do it based on looking at other books, but then it's everything has to go through the editor. So it might be a discussion beforehand, or when we show them several pages to approve, they might say, I like this, or can it be the chapter and not the book title. Like, we go back and forth, but there is a somewhat standard of what you do, which is it's usually the author and the book title is normally the standard. And I think if it has lots of chapter titles, then you would do the book and then the chapter titles. But usually I do the author. For me, it's the author name and then the title of the book.
Okay. And speaking of books with chapter titles, what is your feeling on a table of contents up front? Do you think that it helps or doesn't really serve any purpose?
I would say it helps when it's like a nonfiction. If it's a poetry book or something of that nature, or even like a historical fiction where there is some facts, but typically with novels, I can't tell you the last time that I put a table of contents in a novel. It's happened, but maybe if it's short stories. But I think if it's just one novel that you read straight through, unless there's a reason, I don't think I've done a table of contents.
Okay. And when you are designing, what programs do you use to design?
I use InDesign, Photoshop, and Illustrator.
All right. For anybody who is planning to self-publish and is looking for a freelance designer, are there questions you would suggest that they ask the designer to make sure they're getting somebody who knows what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's more about their portfolio, and then you ask them questions as you're looking through it, and you just see how comfortable they are and how they respond, and talk to them about the process. For me, I do like to give people a little bit of feedback to see how they'll take it, because I know, at a publisher, there's a lot of people that are making comments, and it might not be what you want to hear. So that is very important, to see how they take feedback. So that's why I think it's good to look at people's work, because it's not even about the work, it's how they're reacting to you reacting to their work, that you read those signs. I think you can tell if it's someone like that's really excited about their work, or really nervous, or if you get someone that's showing a project that didn't go their way, and then they roll their eyes, and I feel like it's looking at someone's portfolio is a really good way to like learn people's personalities.
Flipping the table, as a designer, if you were being asked by an author to do work, what kinds of questions would you ask the author to make sure it's somebody that you want to work with?
I think I would have a conversation about their story and their experience, and what their process is, and what they I would probably want to know what they want at, you know, for a cover, and what, you know, you ask the same questions that you know, are in our art forum, like, where does the book live with, you know, what are the comp titles, and see if they've done their research, because I think that's the thing with editors, is they're so knowledgeable about not just their book, but the market. And I think that's what I would want, you know, as for an author, if I'm gonna work on the project, I want to make sure that they've done their research.
Any words of wisdom for somebody who's trying to break into design, either on a freelance basis or trying to get into a publishing company?
I would say, just just do your research, see what's out there, start doing mock covers. If you want to get into doing YA books, or, you know, middle grade books, like, start doing mock covers. And I think my advice once you're in is always have a side project, like, because it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of people kind of directing you at any level. And I think you want to make sure that, you know, an editor, they're really invested. Authors are really invested. Everyone has their hand in it. So in order to have a really thick skin, you've got to have your own thing on the side, and it makes life a little easier for you.
And last question for you. Any last words of wisdom for somebody who's designing their book, especially for people who are planning to go out into the market on their own?
I would say, do your research, look what's out there. You want to have a good combination of knowing what's out there, but also not copying and doing your own thing. So you need to know, you know, if you're putting your book out with a sea of books with black covers, maybe that it's good to know, but maybe your cover shouldn't be black. Like, you really have to look at what it's going to look like next to everything else. And I guess that's my biggest advice is just, and talk to people, you know, show your work, get feedback, and
Does that idea of knowing what it looks like next to everything else change in this digital landscape where people are buying their books online? You might not be seeing it really next to other things in the same category?
Well, I mean, if you look at Amazon, there's always, like, if you like this, you buy this. So I feel like it does hold true digitally.
Okay. Well, Marci, thank you so much for talking to me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. You have a really good night.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.